So it's anybody over 18, but depending on your situation, your demographic, there's some nuance to what you need. So if you're successfully convincing people like, hey, maybe I need to take this trust thing serious, the next question be like, well, okay, how do I do that? Like, where do I go to a bank? Do I Google it? When it comes to a trust, what are some best practices for establishing a trust?
Yeah, the first thing I tell everybody is get educated. Spend some time understanding the language because once you understand the language, you know more about what you need. You never want to walk into someone's office and be at their mercy of their education and information, right? You want to be able to walk into an office and say, here are the things that I would like. Here's my goals. Here's my family structure. And these are the types of things that I think might be helpful now. Help me reach this goal. But we can't even get to the goal part because we don't know what our options are. So first thing I always say is get educated. And we have a free resource library on our website for people to learn more about estate planning. So, they can always go
What's
there,
the
and
website?
it's woodlegalgroup.com/access resource library. So it's there. It's free. People can get a bunch of information, but it's a great starting point. We also have a checklist that says, how to vet an estate planning attorney, right? What are some of the questions you want to ask? Number two is you're going to want to go to an attorney. This is never something that you want to do by yourself, right? There's just too many nuances for individual families. And particularly in our community, we have to overcome the sort of history of the war on drugs, right? Which has meant that so many people have had contacts with the carceral system and with drugs and addiction. And so when we're thinking about beneficiaries, if you've got someone who was incarcerated for any period of time, they may have restitution issues to the state, so judgments against them. So you can't just leave assets directly to them, or the state's literally going to attach to that and take it. They may have back child support issues from having been incarcerated, which once you sort of get into that cycle is nearly impossible to get out of because of the interest rates on that. And so, people just sort of stay in this cycle. And if they get inheritance from a family member, let's say a third of a house, and they get it outright, well, the state could attach to that third of a house. The state could have forced a sale to get their money based on this one beneficiary's issues. And so when we are thinking about, well, what do we need for a trust and what kinds of protections can we put in there, we're really looking at who are our beneficiaries and what kinds of things are going on in their lives that we may need to protect these resources from or for. So the second is going to be go to an attorney, right? Sit down and talk to someone who is culturally competent enough to have this conversation with you, because there are many attorneys who won't even ask that question, right? Or don't know to ask that question, or don't think about it, or do sort of balance sheet estate planning when it can really be far more comprehensive.
So it's a particular type of lawyer, though. We're looking for estate. That's that the official title, estate planning attorney?
Yeah, you're going to be looking for an estate planning attorney, and there are very few of us in the country. I would say there are about 4% of lawyers are people of color, and it's even less that are estate planning lawyers, and even less of that do intergenerational wealth planning. We are putting together a list with a fellow estate planning attorney out of Texas and Arkansas, and so we do have a list of estate planning attorneys around the country that we can refer people to as well.
Now, you said a big part of this conversation is beneficiaries. So I'm wondering, what's your advice for a single person with no children?
Still has to go somewhere. So beneficiary is anybody you want to have your stuff, right? It doesn't have to be kids. It could be charities. It could be your alma mater. It could be your church. It could be your godchildren. It could be your best friend. It really could be anybody, right? You get to decide, and that's the beauty of it. If you don't decide, the state does have a default plan, right? It'll go through probate court, and they'll look and they'll say, are you married? Nope. Do you have kids? Nope. Are your parents still alive? If yes, your parents will split it. If they're not, then they'll look out, do you have any siblings? No. Okay, let's go up. And they'll keep going until they find beneficiaries. And that means that people you have maybe never met or don't like may end up with your house and all your stuff and the things that you've worked for, all because you didn't say where you wanted it to go.
Now this journey, I'm
And
sorry.
that's the power.
No, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, but
Go ahead.
that's the power, right? The power to create intergenerational wealth is in each and every one of our hands. And it's really a matter of taking that control over our legacies and not leaving it to chance. One house that's properly protected and leveraged can perpetuate wealth for generations, right? One house. So when people say, I just have this one house, I'm like, you just have this one asset that people can leverage over and over and over again to buy more houses, to pay off debt for school, to um, start businesses. Tax-free leveraging, right? Refinancing a house is debt, so that's not taxed like a sale would be, where you'd have capital gains taxes. And so, if you've got this one house and you say, "Hey, you can't sell it, but you can rent it," and you put that in your estate plan. You say nobody in the family can live here, but you have to have tenants in there. You can say that. You can say you can't sell it. Now they can't sell it, right? So now you've controlled that asset. You say, okay, you can leverage it, but you can leverage it only up to 75% of the fair rental value. Now what have you done? Right? You've made sure they haven't put the property underwater. They don't ever leverage it, that there's some margin for market fluctuation as well as for repairs and maintenance, right? But you've also said, here's a formula for how you take one, two, three, $400,000 out of this property every 15 years, tax free, that somebody else pays for.
Super dope.
That can fund a lot of things, right?
Yeah. So let's talk about the why a little bit more, though, because you dove deep into the research. Help us all understand why we should take this serious, why we should not blow this off, why this is something that we shouldn't put to the side for a later time. How serious is the situation? Because you talked about you were specifically researching what the wealth situation was for marginalized communities. How bad is it?
It's a state of emergency. Most people don't realize it, but we're in a state of emergency. People started talking about, there was another study done in 2017 that found that by 2053, the median net worth for African American families was set to hit zero. And that by 2073, Latinx communities would hit that same result, a median net worth of zero if we did nothing. What people aren't really talking about is that 1 in 555 African Americans died in 2020 as a result of COVID-19. So we have severely accelerated this timeline on this road to zero wealth, with more than 70% of African Americans unprepared for this wealth transfer. We're slated to lose many of the gains that we've already made. In fact, approximately $2 billion is lost annually in this probate process. That is 100% avoidable. And so when we think about what could $2 billion annually inside of our families do for our economic base, how could we be thriving more, right? How do we turn this tide? There is no substitute for a paid off house. There is no substitute for an inheritance, right? Because let's say you inherit a property from your grandmother and you get to keep her low tax basis. I'm sorry, what? She pays $500 a year in property taxes. That makes that house really affordable, right? Let's say she locked into a mortgage during this 2020 crisis and or the COVID-19 crisis and has a 3% interest rate. If you tried to buy that same house today, you would pay exponentially more than whatever she owes, right? Your interest rate would be at least 5%, which is where we are right now and climbing. Your property taxes are going to be on the market rent, on the market rate based on what you bought it for. That is significantly less valuable, right? Because you don't have any equity growth in it. But the inherited house is all equity. So what you can do with that equity filled asset is rent it or live in it, creating affordable housing. If it's in a good neighborhood with a school system, perhaps you can even educate your children. So now you don't have to pay private school tuition or go to a subpar school, et cetera, et cetera. That's all wealth and opportunity, right? That one house had the ability to change that trajectory. And so when we're talking about what are we slated to lose, we're slated to lose everything. And it doesn't matter what we do in our individual lives, right? It doesn't matter how much people are flexing on Instagram. If you do not have your financial house secure, all that gold, glittery stuff that people like to show, the shiny stuff, right, will crumble.